Hey there, welcome back to Care Anywhere. At CGFNS, we spend a lot of time focusing on the career mobility of our global health workforce. That's why we're hosting this podcast to talk about what it's going to take to train and equip the health workforce of the future. But it also means addressing the challenges that face health workers around the globe when they want to stay right where they are in their own countries to learn, to grow, and have opportunities for advancement. I'm talking today to Mary Sebert, who oversees the nursing programs with the Center for Global Health out of Massachusetts General Hospital. She and her colleagues there in the Center for Global Health are really developing and executing programs that build capacity in country with training, with scholarships, with fellowship programs. So I'm excited about the conversation we had today and to share it with you because I know you'll be inspired by the work that she's doing and the work the center is doing to help raise all boats in our global health ecosystem. So stick around. This episode starts now. Across global health systems, health workers on the front lines of care delivery are carrying more on their shoulders today than ever before. Workforce shortages are increasing. Scope of practice is shifting, and skill sets are definitely evolving. In this podcast, we're setting the table for some powerful discussions with nurses, allied health professionals, regulators, tech innovators, and other thought leaders across the globe. Together, we're diving deep on the challenges and opportunities that loom large for recruiting, training, and equipping the health worker of the future. Welcome to Care Anywhere, the Global Health Workforce Podcast, brought to you by CGFNS International. Welcome back to Care Anywhere. I'm joined today by Mary Sebert, who's a nurse and executive leader with the Center for Global Health at Massachusetts General Hospital. We're going to be talking today about the Center for Global Health, the work that they do, and specifically the work that Mary does with nurses globally and workforce development, which obviously ties in great to what we're talking about here on our podcast. So, Mary, welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you here with us today. And let's start with your nursing background. How did you get started in nursing, and where has your career taken you to get you to where you are today with the center?
Well, thanks, Leah. We're super excited to be here to talk about everything nursing. I love to talk about nursing. I have been a nurse for 39 years, starting my career as most young nurses do in a hospital setting, and moving from medical unit to critical care, and then to administrating home care for 12 years. And then as life happens, I was able to, at the age of 40, 15 years have been a nurse, I joined the Peace Corps and moved to Romania. And then upon my return, I was a nurse educator at a hospital for several years, and they always send you response things for the Peace Corps. And so, of course, I saw one for a nurse educator in Africa, and I signed right up. And so I returned to the Peace Corps in 2013. All along my nursing career, I've had such great, fantastic opportunities. So I love that. And now I was recruited from Uganda to work at the Center for Global Health at Mass Gen, and that's where you'll find me now.
That's great. Well, Mass Gen's always on the cutting edge of innovation and leadership. Throughout my career, I've certainly seen and heard and witnessed a whole lot of spearheading of initiatives, global and domestically, from that organization. So I'm excited to have you here to talk about that. You mentioned something really interesting there that we don't hear very often anymore, which is a reference to the Peace Corps. I'm in my 50s, so I'm old enough to remember when, that was kind of a big deal for people to spend some time in the Peace Corps, not only developing skills, but having a more global view and broadening a worldview and an understanding of diversity and community around the world. And so I'm just interested in what drew you to the Peace Corps, and then, what did you learn from that experience in the Peace Corps that's not only shaped your career trajectory, because obviously now the global work you do really kind of grew out of the work that began in the Peace Corps and probably a lot of relationships that you built there. But how does it approach your work today, the time that you spent in the Peace Corps? It's such a fascinating topic. Yeah.
Well, the Peace Corps is fascinating, and I don't think I'm your average Peace Corps volunteer, because who goes mid-career to the Peace Corps?
True. Yes, you
Number
do
one,
usually hear about people like
you
maybe out
know,
of high school or early in their,
out of college,
out of
they
college.
tend to
Yeah.
go. But
Yep.
my life just happened that way, and I took the opportunity. I needed adventure. I needed some stories in my life, and so I said, "This is what I need to do." And so I'm so thankful I made that decision, because it was really, really terrific. It's challenging, as they say. Peace Corps is the toughest job you'll ever love, and there is no doubt about that. There's so much fear going into a situation where you don't know. I mean, you're with a group of other people that are
Yeah.
also doing that, but once you land on your feet and you get moving, it's just such a great experience. And what I've learned from the 6 years I've spent in the Peace Corps is that there are really terrific people all over the world. We hear so many negative stories these days,
Yeah.
and that's painful to hear. But I have met some just wonderful people through my experience, and I think the biggest thing I take away from that experience is cultural humility,
Yeah.
being sensitive to the needs and the way people live their lives in other cultures. And it's my privilege and honor to learn about that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I bring that to my work here. I think if I bring anything to the nurses that I take over to those other countries, it's a knowledge of the country before they go. I have developed material that is mandatory before they make the trip with me, because it opens your eyes to other things, and you're not so surprised. You're still scared,
Yeah.
because and people would say that when I would go to the Peace Corps, I would never have the courage. You know what? You just feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep. Yeah.
Even you expand. I mean, once you expand your brain, it can't go back to the regular size.
Right.
It,
Yep.
it just opens up a whole new world of opportunity, and just a whole new world. You'll never be the same. And
I've heard that, and you would hear that a lot back
yeah.
in the day from people that had gone through
Yeah.
a round or two with Peace Corps, and all of
Mhm.
the things that you mentioned. And I think not only does it shape an appreciation, and I love that phrase, cultural humility is
Mhm.
so powerful. And you're right. We hear so much in the news about what's going wrong in the world, about the war climate, and and climate change, and the
Mhm.
impact of all of those things around the world. And there's probably not enough attention given to organizations that are really reaching across borders and collaborating on global needs, economic needs, health needs, care access needs, all of those things. So I'm so glad we're touching on it today. And that this has shaped the work that you do. But I also would think that you are the most equipped to determine what challenges can really be solved for in meaningful ways. Like you have that ground level view of what's going to work and what isn't going to work when it comes to collaborating and sharing, or building program, or introducing technology, or any of the other things. So I think it's pretty powerful that you lay that groundwork, not only for yourself, but the other nurses that you work with. So let's talk about the work you're doing at MassGen, which is so powerful. I would encourage our audience to go out and look for the Center for Global Health at Massachusetts General, because there's a really great annual report that you guys published that I spent some time reading in preparation for our discussion today. There's a lot of work that the center is doing, and not just in nursing, and we'll talk about some of those other things. But the motto for CGH is driven by the belief that everyone, everywhere has a right to good health, which is such a powerful statement. How are you specifically tackling that proposition? I mean, more broadly, where the center is doing that, but you're doing it in some very specific ways. How do you tackle that missional goal?
Well, I think as a Center for Global Health, just to kind of lay the parameters on what the center is doing, we have on our strategic plan, which you probably saw, there are 5 areas that we work. Global nursing just being one of the 5. And then
Right.
there's global disaster and humanitarian work. There's research and innovation. There's partnerships, developing partnerships that are successful and sustainable, as well as global education. So those are the 5 pillars that we strategically work on. And of course, global nursing is my arm.
Yeah.
And I think in all of the aspects of what we're doing, we're looking at global equity, because there's just a tremendous amount of inequity right now. I mean, that was made so evident during COVID, the pandemic, just in the level of vaccines that were available, and how many vaccines were available and wasted in the Western world, while the people who needed the vaccines were not getting them. So our work, whether it's innovation or research or nursing or humanitarian work, is designed to bring education and care to the populations that need it the most.
Yeah.
The nursing program, we don't provide clinical care. And my belief, and the reason I'm so passionate about education, is because, and I learned this in Peace Corps, you can't take education away. You build the capacity and the skills of an individual.
Yeah.
And they have those. And they don't go away. And so that is what my program particularly is. That's why I'm so passionate about it, is that's what we do. And they're not going to take that away. And by building the skills of the providers, you're building the outcomes to be more positive for the population. And
you're
that's
sowing seed that keeps producing
yes,
fruit. Yeah.
That's the only way that you can be sustainable and successful.
Yeah.
I mean, people might disagree, but I feel very strongly that education is the key.
Yeah. And it's really the only way to build capacity within these countries. You can bring humanitarian aid. There's immediate fixes, and it's not an either or proposition. I'm assuming with the center, it's a both and. It's meeting immediate needs and then looking at long-term solutions for building capacity within those countries. Yeah, super powerful.
Sustainability is a funny word for me. Because I think, what is really sustainable? What does that mean? Is that sustainable for a week, for a month, for 10 years? What does that really mean? But if you build the skills of a nurse, then you build sustainability.
Yeah.
In the skills of that
sustainability.
Nurse.
Yeah.
And that nurse, it'll be a ripple effect. She can affect her colleagues and other patients. And so you start here, and it's like the tree of life. And I mean, that is so important to me.
Yeah. So there are 3 pillars I was reading to the CGA strategy when it comes to global nursing, which you oversee. That's the role that you're in. So there's Global Nursing Fellowship, right? The Nursing Leadership Program and the Scholarship Program. What are each of those? Who are each of those programs designed for? And how do they operate? What do we need to know about those? And also, how successful have they been? Because I know you shared with me some successes on our prep call that I think our audience would be inspired by.
Well, I love each of the programs, but they all serve kind of different needs. The biggest program that we have is the Nursing Fellowship Program, which we started in 2016. We had gotten some grants. And from that, we started a program where we worked with our partners, which was primarily in Uganda, to find out what are the gaps in education. And having spent 2 years there, I understood those gaps. I mean, because there are really not a lot of specialty services that are learned. I mean, master programs as well as bachelor programs are a new concept in many of the African countries. In fact, the university that I work, they're having their silver jubilee in October. It's, for their bachelor's program. So that's pretty exciting. And they've come a long way. But we identified gaps. And so I said, how can we help fill that? And so we started with the first fellowship, which was oncology, because they had an oncology clinic that served both pediatric population and adult population, but nobody had received good oncology education. So our very first fellowship in 2016 was a lovely oncology nurse. And she spent actually 6 weeks working with the team of nurses on the ground level, starting with what is cancer and moving through the physiology, the pathophys, the pharmacology, all through it. And we spent a lot of time and years working on that. And what's most exciting for me, and I feel really great about this, is the nurse that we trained was my former student in the bachelor's program.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing. And now she is our trainer of trainers, because we've been working with her since 2016, and she's the leader over there. We don't need to go and do fellowships on oncology anymore, because this is what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Build her capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one example of the successes of the fellowship program. We've done it in 3 African countries and 2 Native American reservations in South Dakota, which is my home state. And that's what we try to do, is build the capacity.
Yeah.
And
replicate that knowledge and skill. So it keeps rising.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And we work with them until they're comfortable, and so the fellowship has addressed so many different areas. Like I mentioned oncology, there was also wound care, and critical care is a big area that we work in right now. There's been research with master students, neonatal ICU, the pediatric ICU, and we have our first mental health graduates. They're going to graduate in October. First five nurses with mental health. That is so amazing. So that's our fellowship.
You start with sending expertise into these countries and training and teaching. Who do you send, and how do you get people, I'm assuming from the Mass Gen, clinical population, how do you get those folks into the program and then deployed throughout the world to support? I say that because as an organization that validates and evaluates nurses and other health workers who want to leave their countries to come work in the United States or Canada or New Zealand or some of these parts of the world, what you're doing is actually enabling opportunity, and not just capacity building, but you're enabling them to stay in their home countries and thrive and have opportunity there, so that they don't have to go through a career migration process and try and find opportunity elsewhere, which I think helps solve for a lot of the conundrums we hear about brain drain and brain gain between countries, right? Which is something we're very focused on. So it's very powerful. So back to my original question, how do you pull the people into your program that then become this cadre of experts that sort of go out and help you do this, which is fascinating. And probably something people don't, in nursing, don't even think of as a possible career opportunity for them, to be able to go somewhere else in the world and take everything that they've learned and help train somewhere else that's highly needed. So all of that to say, how do you get that going? What is that programmatically?
So back in 2016, when the program started, the chief nurse from MGH was very instrumental in writing the proposal and for supporting it. And we educated, the leaders, because we can't do this without the support of the chief nurse and the department heads, because they're the ones that have to approve these nurses to leave their units for a couple of weeks. So we have a stipend that tries to pay back that little bit of money while we take their nurses away for a couple of weeks. But there are always, we just asked the question, who in critical care might be interested in doing global work? And the response is very many people.
I bet.
There are a lot of people. I think when we first started, we were kind of looking, is there somebody? But now it's kind of word of mouth. People hear about it and they'll send me emails and say, how can I get involved? I'll say, send me your CV. Let's see, and so we find out who those people might be. And I work with the department chair to find out if it would be available for them, to work with me. And, the thing about this global work is people have a desire to do it, but they don't have a lot of opportunities. There are missions and there's different NGOs you can work at, but through your institution, especially an MGH institution, it's really incredible to be able to offer this opportunity, because it helps keep them wanting to work at MGH.
Yeah.
It's a retainer for nurses. if
And
they can.
it's a short-term deployment. It's not a
Yes.
long-term commitment of
No.
time. They have it's sponsored and managed through their employer, so they
Hmm.
don't have to worry about not having a job when they come back, right? So it seems
Right.
like a perfect scenario for someone who would like
Hmm.
the opportunity. What an adventure for the
I've never had
nurse.
a nursing fellow say, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah.
What I get is, when can we do this again?
Yeah.
And what it brings to the nurses that back home, it brings cultural humility.
Yeah.
We have a huge diverse population that we serve here.
Yeah.
And to, to understand the intricacies of taking care of somebody of a different population, that helps. And to look at the resources. We struggle with gloves and tape and masks and so many things in these low resource settings. And to come here and say, oh my God, we're so wasteful. How can we be less wasteful?
Yeah.
So the learning is bi-directional. It's bi-directional, which is really, really important.
Yep. I bet.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the nursing leadership program? Talk about that. So that's a little different than the fellowship program, right?
It is different. Yep. The nursing leadership is designed for nursing leaders, nurses who are in charges of units, or just nurses, because every nurse is a leader.
Yeah.
They are leading the patient care. So it's a versatile program, because what I do is really fix it to the audience. Who's the audience? And I have had executive nurses. I've had nurses in charges. I've had faculty, preceptors. And so you take and adapt that. And the courses that are offered include all those that you would look: communication, conflict, problem solving. Very important is advocacy, because nurses are wonderful advocates for patients, but they also need to advocate for themselves, for their institutions, teaching them to advocate on a national level for policy change. So that's one of the portions. And who needs that? So I look at the audience. Do they need that, or do they need more how to give feedback, or how to coach? So it depends. And then, you empower them with these skills to be better at what they're doing.
So this is nurse leadership training that you're offering in these countries to nurses who need those non-clinical skills that are so important to that career advancement and growth and the mobility trajectory of their careers that isn't necessarily available to them where they are.
Nurses don't go through nursing school learning how to be leaders. I mean, I myself was one of those that was in critical care. So you're a good critical care nurse. Let's make you the director of the unit.
Right.
And so you enter this sphere not knowing at all what that really means. And I'd like to avoid that for people if it's at all possible.
Yeah, I say the same thing about education.
Yeah.
Just because you know a thing doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good teacher.
100%, Lea. 100%. Oh my gosh.
It's true of leadership as well. It's just a different set of skills, and they're so complementary. But the fact that you guys are investing specifically in training up and raising up good leaders and giving them the right skills to advocate for themselves, for their patients. And the way we see nursing, I tell people all the time, as much as we hear about critical shortage and burnout and a lot of the, sort of negative things, challenges facing health workers and health careers, it's really never been a better time to step into nursing and to become a nurse or to become, an allied health member because of the shift in scope of practice and the increasing influence about nurses specifically. I would say nurses have a greater voice at the policy table and in care model evolution than they probably ever had before. And the ability to impart that and translate that globally, I think, is so critical, because I don't know that that's true of nurses everywhere in the world. We see it certainly very much so here. So kudos to you and to your team for recognizing how critical it is to build that. Okay, so the third program under your nursing program leadership is the scholarship program. How does that work?
Well, the scholarships started in 2014. When I was living there, we started the master's program. And our first one was critical care, which was actually my specialty when what I was teaching in Uganda as well. So we started the master's program. And then we supported that with nursing fellows to provide the more advanced education. And then in 2023, there was 3 additional tracks. So that was where the midwifery, mental health, and pediatric intensive care came into play. And so we've funded we have a cadre of 24, graduated in October, but we've had over 70 graduates from the master's program that have been served with scholarships.
Yeah.
Had they not had scholarships, they wouldn't be able to continue their education. And I did a survey last summer, of all of the graduates, and 89% of those are still in Uganda. And to me, that is a beautiful thing. That was, part of the goal is to keep them there. And 37% of those that have graduated and are in country are teaching at other nursing schools in Uganda. 32% of them are leaders within the country.
Yep.
And then 26% of them are running intensive care units. So I think it's achieved exactly what we meant to achieve by providing scholarships, because it's inexpensive to compared to the United States.
Yeah.
And so why not get them their master's degree so they can take the profession up another level, it's just being recognized by the Ministry of Health.
And you're also addressing another issue. I can tell you, I've been in my role here for about a year, and I was less familiar with what that global landscape looked like in terms of workforce. And I was surprised to learn how many countries lack those advanced degree programs. And, that there are many countries where a level, what we would consider an RN or a level 1 nurse that is the maximum level of education they have access to. And it's why so many of them will temporarily work in another country so that they can seek an advanced degree, get a BSN or an MSN, which is not available to them. So it's really great that you're not only supporting that, but then also providing the means for people to pursue those degrees. And it does a lot to keep them in country, because when we talk to migrating nurses, many of them will migrate because they truly aren't interested in the adventure of working in another country or learning somewhere else. But a lot of them do that because they have to, because there's not the opportunity to learn and, have advanced career pathways that they can have access to in other countries. So the fact that you guys are investing in and successfully seeing them stay in country to continue to work and build capacity raises all boats, I would say, in terms of global health. And that's really the ultimate outcome we want to see. I'm assuming that you developed these programs. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning to address the gaps in training and exposure that are there. So I don't know if we need to touch on that, but are there other problems or challenges that you've identified, either working in the Peace Corps or working in country? You said you were in Uganda for 2 years that that these programs are solving for, and I don't mean just education, but there's a ripple effect into family and community and the economics of communities when you build this kind of capacity. Can you speak to that from your experience?
I would say the work that we're doing in Sierra Leone is newer. We started doing that work in 2022. The model that my fellowship is built on is in collaboration with Seed Global Health. That's how we started the program. And it's filling the gaps of long-term educators. And incidentally, the nurse who runs the midwifery program for Seed Global Health was my nursing fellow in Uganda for 2 different times.
Wow.
And so I know her very well. So I made a call to her to see how we could help and share this model in Sierra Leone to build upon that, because their maternal mortality rate was one of the highest. I think there was 3 countries that shifted position of the highest in the world. And the Ministry of Health is just really, really focused on decreasing that. And so I thought, if we can help, would take midwives over to help with the education, that's going to help the country, because you lose a mama and you lose a baby, you are affecting the entire community.
Yeah.
It's such a social enhancement to educate the nurses. I mean, they have seen a rapid decrease in their maternal mortality from 2017 down to now. And it's remarkable, but there's such a community involvement in it. of children. I mean, if economically, if you lose mama and baby, you've lost education and support for the family.
Yeah.
You've got children that are 5, that are young, that aren't. I mean, it affects so many people at a community level.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't see that. They're seeing this, but Sierra Leone is a very clear example of the wider audience that can be touched.
Yeah.
So I think same within in Uganda, when you increase the education of the locals, the regional hospital, which is where we work, it filters out to the districts.
Yeah. I mean, you're
and-
giving them all those tangibles, economics and
Yes.
family infrastructure, but it's also the intangible but really important thing of giving them hope. That it shifts their sense of who they are and what it means to thrive as a community, and how can you thrive as a community and have hope as a community if you have this high mortality rate, and how devastating that is repeatedly. So it's that's an amazing and such a great example. I'm sure you have many others, but that's a very powerful one. I appreciate you sharing that. I'll be thinking about that for the rest of the day, probably. So how do you determine which locations you go to? I mean, obviously there are a lot of high need, low access communities in the world that need just these kind of programs, and I'm sure you guys are looking to expand them. How do you how do you determine those locations and the partnerships and collaborations you have within those communities?
Well, the first partnership and the strongest one that we have at the Center for Global Health is with Uganda. We have the Global Health Collaborative, which is run by Ugandans in Mbarara, and they kind of oversee all those, the oversight for our work there. The other locations were kind of determined, and the partnerships were determined by work collaborating with other people, because there's a lot of us doing the same work, especially here in Boston. There are a lot of organizations, and I mentioned Seed Global Health.
Seed, yeah.
We are also doing some work in Sierra Leone with the Global Disaster Team with Partners in Health. And so by partnering and putting together what we found is a great relationship, because I have a lot of the educational material that I can provide to Partners in Health. So we don't have to, develop the will, build the will, whatever they say.
Yep.
I've got this material. Let's share it. This isn't secret material, and if it can benefit another group. And so if they're working, Partners in Health is working in a variety of countries around the world. They're a very, large organization. They're in Liberia. They're, in Malawi and in Sierra Leone. And so if the path is paved, I should say, it's kind of easy to slip in, and for me to kind of work with my model built on Seed to follow them is very, very easy to do. Logistically, it saves me a lot of resources so that I can spend it on developing the nurses rather than messing around trying to figure out all the logistics. And that's stressful. It's stressful to start to figure out who to talk to, where to go, but
and the relationship building is so important to that. You don't just show up and say, hey, we're bringing all these resources, so that that networking and that collaborative, I'm sure this stuff kind of bubbles up through relationships. Someone has a relationship.
It's all about relationships. That's because if you can't develop a relationship, you can't collaborate.
Exactly. Yeah.
And,
when you are working with organizations where everyone has the heart to share, and there's a transparency of work, and like you said, why reinvent the wheel and duplicate effort? Let's lift what's already working and replicate it. And I think that's a beautiful strategy. And honestly, in my experience, the only way those partnerships really work when you're looking at issues like these. Do you have plans to expand to other countries with these programs? I know, and we may have just touched on that, but I know you mentioned Sierra Leone, and I'm sure those things kind of come up as you're talking to your partners. Anything on the horizon that you want to share?
It's funding dependent.
Yeah. Which we didn't talk about because you guys are, how are you funded? Was probably
we are
the question.
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy.
The Center for Global Health is largely the programs, the research. A lot of it's through Harvard faculty, so they're able to get NIH grants and stuff. But we operate really strictly with gifts from foundations or patients or whatever. So it's dependent on the generosity of others, really, to continue the work.
Yep.
And if we should get so lucky and this, get a huge grant, I mean, then we could really look at expanding.
Yeah. So can you touch on, you mentioned at the front end that the Center for Nursing isn't the only arm. There's 5 pillars, I think you said, for Center for Global Health. Could you touch, I know they aren't your areas, but our audience might be interested in the other work that you guys do around research and humanitarian action, disaster relief, et cetera. How do those? Well,
for the research, that's very active. That's been the first, that was the first reason for the Center for Global Health. It started with research. And currently we have 22 active projects in Uganda, but our collaborative, the community that we've developed for global health as a hub of the Center for Global Health has hundreds of research opportunities going around anywhere in the world, in South America, India, anywhere. So there's a lot of research going on. I mean, that's one of the primary things that MGH is known for and that Harvard's known for.
And that should really be foundational to any center. Yeah. If you don't have a research arm, you don't have the credibility of really all the rest of the work that you're doing. So,
so that really laid the foundation for most of the other work. Innovation has been very, very successful in developing different innovative ways of providing care. I can give you a great example from neonatal ICU. I had a NICU nurse from MGH that's gone to Uganda twice, and she did the first time her assessment, and she realized that these neonates are dying just from respiratory reasons. And so there's MGH has had some innovators create and it maybe not just MGH, a bubble CPAP, which is stuff that you can get off of Amazon. Which is a little jar and some tubing and some nasal prongs and some earplugs to fit in the baby's, and then an oxygen tank. And so it provides a light seat pressurized so the babies can breathe.
Yeah.
And so that in the first 6 months decreased the mortality from 13% to 7%.
Wow. In 6 months.
And that's amazing. And that was in 2018 and 2019 that they were learning how to do that. And, I was there in April of 2024 and they're using it. So that's innovation. Yeah. That's the innovation arm. And so that's really incredible.
And sometimes it's innovation by simplification.
Yes. Back to the basics, people. Yes. Back to the basics.
A simple kit of things that can make that big of a difference in that shorter period of time. Yeah. That's amazing.
So another arm that's really, really, really important to nursing is also nurse-led, is our global disaster team and humanitarian response. And I've worked closely with them since basically 2019, and then the pandemic happened. And there wasn't a lot of global work going on anywhere, except that I was working with them to provide COVID care in some places. But in I guess I should start with the Ukraine crisis. Yeah. When that started, they answered the call. They went with some other organizations because these nurses in Ukraine were not prepared for trauma patients, much less conflict. So they developed a trauma nursing fundamentals course. And now we're still having this conflict that we knew it would go on this long is crazy. But they have trainers of trainers now. So they've moved through all these phases and they have people there that are doing the training. And then we took that course because, again, you share your material. It's open for education. Everybody needs to learn how to stop the bleed.
Right.
So we first piloted that in Uganda with the master's students in 2022. So we held 2 courses, and it was the first time that course material has been taken out of Ukraine. And we did 2 cohorts, and we realized this works. You just adapt a little bit, depends on your level of nurses, and you still stop the bleed, which saves lives.
Yeah.
So then in April this year, we opened it up for another cohort of nurses from the hospital and brought in the community nurses from the nearby districts, because everybody needs to learn it. So we've conducted it 4 times, and we've been able to adapt it again to reach the audience because of the level of education. You don't know what it is, but everybody can learn something.
Yeah.
So we've been working closely with them. They also work on the border of the United States and Mexico. I myself have been deployed with them 7 times to provide care at clinics that are down there by other NGOs that are taking care of the people on the border.
Wow.
So they've been doing that work consistently.
I have to say for our audience that what you mentioned there about the disaster relief work that you're doing in Ukraine is a great example. On a previous episode of our podcast, we've talked about the fact that we have just launched a global certification exam for rehab nurses. Because there's such a need for training and validated credentials in the area of rehabilitation medicine. And the staggering statistic that out of the 8 billion people in the world, 1.2 billion of them need some form of rehabilitation care. And we talked about on that episode that some of it is climate issues, natural disasters that lead to a lot of long-term rehabilitation care that's needed that you don't really think about unless you're working in those environments. But also the war climate, how much of what you're talking about leads to patients and care providers who are providing long-term rehab care. So I thought I would pause there because we've literally just been talking about that on the podcast, that, that there's a tremendous need for long-term occupational therapy and physical therapy, and sometimes speech therapy that is the result of these events. Absolutely. And in the moment are tragic and disastrous, but they have a long tail when it comes to continued care that there's a shortage of around the world. So you gave a great example of it there. Thank you so much for that. I love all of those stories and the work that you guys are doing. One common thread through our podcast, because we're coming to the end of our time, is highlighting career trajectories and opportunities for nurses and other allied health workers. We have a global health nurse and health worker audience to our podcast. There are people that are entering the profession now all around the world who are thinking about what their career opportunities might look like. And I mentioned earlier, I think it's an exciting time to step into nursing and allied healthcare because of the global shortage, but also the opportunities. We talk about critical shortage, but there's tremendous opportunities. What advice do you give to nurses who are entering the profession today about where their careers can take them? You're such a powerful example of someone whose career took you in unusual and exciting places, not only in frontline care, but just globally, learning more about healthcare and health delivery around the world. What advice would you give to new nurses coming into the profession today about where their careers can take them?
That's pretty easy to give advice, because I think whatever you dream, you can do that. But initially, you need to learn everything that you possibly can. If you start out working in a hospital, as most nurses do, it sets your foundation for the rest of your career. You learn everything and find out what really drives you, what makes you really passionate, and strive to be the best at that. And don't be afraid to make the moves along the way to learn and learn and learn and learn, because everything you learn will serve you in the end. I've learned that. 39 years of nursing, there's nothing that I've learned that I haven't used somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And I think
too.
In all areas, I just think nurses need to be patient.
Yeah.
Be patient and do the best job that you're doing, whatever that job is, learning the most that you can, take from it what you can, and move on to the next thing and continue to build. And then if you want to do global work, it's open. It's open for you. If you want to be an educator, it's open for you. Anything that you dream, you can pretty much fulfill that dream with a nursing degree.
Absolutely. And I was going to say for our global audience, you might be a nurse working somewhere that has opportunities like you guys are affording at Mass Gen to take your skills and go out for a period of time and share that your expertise. Or you might be somewhere where you're on the receiving end of that. You have the opportunity to receive from a Center for Global Health like Mass General. And I hope there are more programs out there like that, not only for people to receive those skills, but for all of those nurses and health workers who want to be part of giving them as well and putting those out in the world. So we are at the end of our time, and this has been a beautiful, powerful, fascinating discussion. And I just want to, give you so much praise and kudos, Mary, for the career that you've given your heart and time and skills to, because I think it's so impactful. You're making a huge difference in the world, not only for nurses, but their communities, their families, for infrastructure building and capacity building. I can't think of a greater work that you could be doing. And I'm sure it's very fulfilling. And I know Mass General and the center are very proud to have you working there and leading the way. Thank you for joining us today on this podcast and sharing your story. And I know that our audience is super excited about that. Where can people go to find out more about the Center for Global Health if they want to learn more about it or find out more about your research and some of the things that you're doing? Where do we direct people who want to learn?
You can direct them to the MGH Global Health website.
Okay.
The Center for Global Health. If you are interested in nursing, particularly, all the programs are there. Okay. They can find my email there as well.
Are the opportunities to participate available to nurses who aren't part of the Mass Gen network? Is there a way for other nurses to get involved if they're not if they don't work for Massachusetts General?
Not at this point.
I anticipate that might be a question, like, how do I get involved? I'd love to do something.
Exactly. What I do, if they are interested and they're a nurse, I send them to other NGOs that are, like, there are a lot of crises NGOs that I send.
So there are some groups they could get connected to.
There definitely, yeah. Project Hope, there's just Global Response Medicine. There's a lot of NGOs, and I just refer them to that.
I might see if you can shoot me a list of those, and we'll put them up when we post this podcast. Make sure we post some links.
Those are some of the partner organizations that we've worked with a global disaster. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We love this time that we spent with Mary today. Fascinating, for sure, and super important work that she's doing and the folks at the Center for Global Health. Stick around. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. There's more to come from Care Anywhere, the Global Health Workforce podcast, brought to you by CGFNS International. Thanks. Have a great day. That's it for this episode of Care Anywhere. Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll tune in for future episodes where we will continue these powerful discussions about our global health workforce. If you missed any episodes, you can find them at cgfns.org/podcast or by subscribing to our channel on your favorite podcast platform. Just look for our podcast logo or search for Care Anywhere to find us. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.